Welcome, Nana. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
Thanks for having me.
So let's jump in. Introduce yourself and your leadership experience and anything else you want to share with us.
So I'm Nana, has been mentioned, owner operator of HIGHPOINT Consulting. It's an operations consulting and management firm. What I really do is partner with small business owners. I have a leaning towards women-led businesses, but operations is everywhere. And what I do is partner with them to solve daily operational issues. So those are issues that I solve using my experience, probably 15 plus years in corporate, like private sector, not-for-profit, startup, and being an entrepreneur, using these things, including being a generalist and combining them all with operations frameworks and standard frameworks, best practices, and using those to solve problems and to hit certain goals and targets of the business owner. In terms of my leadership experience, as I shared, I've come from corporate space and I've led operations for smaller companies. I've been inside of larger organizations where I'm leading teams of individuals from various skill levels, education levels, and managing up, I would say, also to executive leadership as well. And so that experience, I think my experience runs across the whole board in terms of leadership contribution, feeling leadership, and then being a leader as well.
And that gives you insight, right? Like different angles and different insights, and also all types of organizations and sizes of organizations.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
What has impacted your leadership style the most? Like, is there a particular experience or?
I would say, it's interesting because sometimes your, impact professionally and in life happens when you're young, right? It's when you're most impressionable, I would say, to some degree. And those are the lessons that stick with you for years to come. I would say the biggest impact or lesson experience that I've had was through my time working for a consulting firm. And my boss at the time, who was the leader, even while it was a small organization, he was very direct in his communication. I mean, he wasn't rude, he was just clear in what he had to say, whether it was good or not good. And so from him, what I learned and carried through to this day is that clear, direct communication is important. It's important for the person to understand where they've gone wrong. It's important for that individual or team to understand what they've done right and how you can actually move forward rather than, a lot of flowery language where sometimes that confuses the situation. Having direct conversation opens the door for more conversation, actually. So that's like one of the biggest learning experiences. At the time, it didn't necessarily feel comfortable because it was very direct, It's like, well, I don't think this works, like that was, but lovely man. So it was still a positive experience.
There's a saying, I think Brené Brown said this, that clarity is kind or something like that, right?
That's correct.
So there is so much to be said about clarity and so much clarity missing for all of us, I think.
That's
clear and kind go together.
Absolutely. This is going to be the most effective way to get results, actually.
So talking about results, how would you define a high performing team? What are the criteria you look for to see if the team is performing well?
What I've found is that teams that are performing at a high level are almost in a way self-sufficient. And so they are able to work through challenges internally despite what's happening outside of their department or their function. So there can be a lot of politics, there can be a lot of drama, but they're able to organize themselves and deliver on whatever those requests might be, whatever the objective is, with very few excuses, right? Or complaining, like delivering and complaining at the same time. They're usually able to stay focused and still be sensitive to what is happening around them, but continue to be focused to deliver what is asked. The other thing I would say is that high performing teams I find are those that are able to bring options and alternatives. oftentimes there is, an objective of some kind or something that has to be done, and there's a solution that is produced. But in a high-performing team, often they take it like an extra step. And so they bring forward a solution, but what they also do is bring forward alternatives or just, like a caveats to the conversation or to that solution, which demonstrates that they have thought thoroughly about a lot of other factors that might influence what the final decision might be. And also what it does is it is an indicator that they've considered other functions, other factors into the solution. So it's not that, when high performing teams are there, they're going the extra mile. They're not simply carrying out whatever task is being given to them. And then I would say the last thing is there seems to be, in my experience, leaders from within. And so you would have, maybe different functions, and they have their own contributions to an objective. But within, let's say, marketing, there is sort of one voice that comes together and is delivering that message. And you can still see that there's collaboration amongst other teams. They have spoken to their counterparts to come up with solutions, or at least acknowledge the challenge in, that other functions might feel. And so having that one voice, or there's sort of a common thread of one leader or one voice coming out of the various functions. And so that's what I've seen and experienced.
So like a unified voice, but that also represents the team and the different points of view.
Correct. You don't have somebody speaking for the team and then somebody objecting. You know what I mean? And it does happen. But that those high performing teams, you feel the teams, right? The feeling that they are unified in the messaging and in the solution that they want to provide.
Yeah. And to get to that point, they should have discussed or kind of entertained different opinions, but still come to a consensus.
That's correct.
So the first thing you mentioned, the self-sufficient teams, right? And it's a principle in Agile as well, if I'm not mistaken, right? For the team to be as self-sufficient as possible, to have all the key players in the team. But I also find in today's environment, that's especially in large organizations, that's really hard because there are roles and responsibilities, there are different silos, different teams. I feel like it's hard to achieve self-sufficiency organizationally, right? Unless this org structure is built that way, the corporate culture specifically has this as a guideline. How do you see that? Like, how do we get that balance of self-sufficiency plus exist in the current environment of different departments and silos?
Yeah, it can be challenging, especially since, the workforce is spanning different generations. Let's call it landscape, the environment is different. We have a lot of hybrid working, so that energy is a little bit different as well. I think that, the leader is going to have to identify individuals who have, let's call it potential. I don't know if I want to use all of these kinds of words, but these are sort of standard words we're familiar with, to be those internal leaders, right? Because it's difficult when you're the leader. Of course, you're always putting forth demands, right? Everybody knows that, right? You want this, you want that, you always want it, etc. But if you can find those individuals within who probably are motivated by something, right? Some are going to be motivated by money, right? Some of them will be. Some are motivated by other benefits they're going to get out of the role, and understanding that to help them to emerge as a leader, to break down those silos. Like maybe it's a person who just loves working with other functions, right? They're not necessarily the best performer, because sometimes we have this impression they're always the leader is the one that's the highest performer, but maybe they're the best collaborator. Maybe their whole function is really just to organize and bring people together. And so I think that a lot of the responsibility is probably going to be placed on the leader to figure out some creative ways and to bring everybody together and remove those barriers, which means that you're going to have to know your team fairly well, right? You have to know the personalities, the strengths of the teams, and what other teams are going to require in order to break down those silos, because the leadership also is there to provide some insight, right? There's got to be a reason why there might be silos. Maybe it's not easy to work with this particular team for a reason, and we really need to lean on leadership to find ways to break down, like just soften the barrier a little bit, to make it easier for teams to work together. So the sort of accountability is on the leader, but there are ways to work within, right? Like to have the team members be really responsible and find ways to be collaborative with other functions. There's no question these things are not easy to do, but what I've just seen is that usually the silos are there if you don't enjoy the job, or if you don't enjoy the people, or if you don't like, there's something that is not satisfying for you. And so the leader really needs to understand that, because anytime I've ever worked in a group, the people that I love getting together with and having meetings with, the people I like working with, and you can produce things and, create new ideas. I might be technical, they might be creative, but for some reason we are aligned or have some synergy that can produce great things. There's a human element to all of this. Yeah.
That really resonated with me, the human element, right? Because at the end of the day, whether it's a sales conversation or whether it's any conversation, we are talking to another human being. There's a way to relate, and there are things that fundamental, human to human element is so key and so important. And I'm gonna pull out what you said about the motivators, right? And in my world, we call them values as well, right? What's important for people perform, or what's important for them in a particular project or function, that hand in hand with that human to human element and really understanding. And that's a way, like what you're saying, is to break down those silos, is to build that.
Yes, absolutely. I agree.
I also resonated with the fact that the leader having more responsibility there, because stakeholder management, moving the teams, upping the level of collaboration is something that you can do. But I also heard you saying finding team members, like internal leaders, you call them, who have a passion for doing that, or who are naturally skilled in collaborating more and galvanizing them almost in the right places to break down these barriers.
Absolutely.
And there's a lot coming up for me, but
okay, that's good. I love this.
That's also the idea that I'm pulling out that you said. Maybe the org structure is okay, it is siloed, but there's a way a leader and the team can even create pseudo self-sufficiency, right? By using some of these techniques you mentioned.
I agree. Yeah.
Okay. So I do want to go into one last thing you said. The second thing you mentioned was teams, high-performing teams come with solutions, right? And they've had enough time to reflect, to, like, those are not just ad hoc solutions, they're solutions that have been really thought through, right? When you look at a team that does that, what do you think enables them to do that versus other teams that maybe don't have as much time to do that, or their style is different, they're always putting out fires? What do you think is the difference is?
There's a few things. I'd say starting from the beginning, which is making sure that the objective and the ask is clear. This is one of those fundamental challenges in every aspect of work, I believe, right? Making sure that that is clear, because then you don't walk away, not understanding the mission and, coming back with some solution that is very superficial. The other is one of those foundational basic things, which is having strong players. So people who have the institutional knowledge, that work history, And it doesn't necessarily mean they've always been in that organization. Maybe that's one, but it could be that they've been in other organizations with similar roles, like having strong players. Not everyone's going to have that. So, like hearty experience that allows teams to deliver solutions that have depth to it and pose a lot of questions, challenges, and consider their colleagues, counterparts, and not just always upper management, how they perceive things, but they can consider a lot of elements of the solution. So I think these two things in particular are quite important to delivering good, robust solutions. Fighting fires, I think, again, we come back to leadership, which is leadership is responsible for that objective, making sure it's clear. Because let's be honest, sometimes the leader is not clear because the leader has a leader, right? And sometimes they may also need some sort of support in their leadership. So what they're passing down is, not very clear. But also it is the leader's responsibility to make sure that the door, let's say, is open, or there's no barriers to clarifying and doing some small level of collaboration. Because sometimes we think, okay, there's a request put out, go do the work, come back. Yes, that's a high performing team, but also they do come back with some intelligent questions, right? To help to massage certain ideas to make sure you're going in the right direction. And the leader really needs to facilitate that and provide some type of guidance, because it is possible in some cases where the leader is not doing that, and it makes it very difficult and challenging for teams to produce their best or put forth their best effort. You gotta have, sort of like you're baking a cake or you're making a new recipe. Everything starts with the ingredients. The higher the quality of those ingredients, the higher chance that the end product is going to be pretty good, right? If you're starting with messiness, don't be surprised when, what you get back is not what you're hoping for. Like basically a miracle is what it is. And so the fighting fires also comes down to the alignment of what the objectives are and what the priorities truly are. Of course, a lot of people will say, well, these are all priorities. Well, I think, it's unfair, right? Like the leader has to be able to sort of isolate and identify and give direction in this area. But it also, if you have strong players on the team, then they will, in a very creative way, set the priority for the leader sometimes. And sometimes that's, the leader may not be the strongest also. And sometimes that is required. That's maybe a strong player is sort of setting priorities so that the main objective, whatever that happens to be, is getting done. And there's not this back and forth trying to be reactive for every request that is out there. And hopefully there's like open communication and good dynamic to be able to express like, hey, you know what? You've already asked for about 5 things. 3 of those 5 are quite time consuming. And if you want something to, a good result that you have to present to your boss, you need to give me time for that. So hopefully that there's room for that open dialogue as well.
So there's a theme here, right? Clarity is what I'm hearing. And
Yeah.
a leader has a lot to do to create that for themselves, getting clarity from their boss or taking a step back just on a daily basis to create that space, and also being clear in how it's communicated out to the team.
Yes, absolutely.
So what are some of the top challenges you see as you work with different types of organizations? I know we got into that a little bit already. We were looking at challenges, but if there's anything else that is top of mind.
Other challenges. I think right now one of the things is, and I think the challenge is always almost the same. I was going to bring in this idea of technology, how to use technology. I would say not just the priority and objective clarity, but there's got to be some level of patience. We usually, when we're under pressure, that's when, maybe there's not a lot of clarity. And there's just like, I just need to have this done. I just need to have it done. And when I think about technology as well, maybe that's something that's on people's minds in this moment. Like, how do we use AI? How do we use it? How do we use it? And they just want an answer. And, one of the questions is, okay, what's our objective? Which requires patience also to first understand where do we really need to use it, right? And then the exercise of finding out what those different alternatives are and those possible solutions. And I think that overall, we're always rushing for the result, which adds pressure, gives you less clarity sometimes because we're anxious to get to the end of something that we're not even sure we'll get to the end of. People can provide answers of what that objective is. Like, people are very seasoned at providing answers that have no substance, and therefore you're lost in what you're doing. But I think the patience is required to understand that things have a process and they take time. And the more organized, the more room you leave for clear objectives, clear direction, the faster actually you're going to get to the end goal, because you're going to uncover other challenges, and you shouldn't see those challenges like, oh, well, when are we going to get to the end of this? Like, I mean, those are also answers, right? So I'm thinking about everything in terms of today's context, just the implementation of new technologies and getting things done quickly, and, not considering how this new technology, whatever it is going to impact the people. Like, that is part of that implementation process. That's part of getting new solutions, is how are the people going to use the tool, and not superficial answers. Like, really, how are they going to use it? And what is that? What are the implications there? What does it mean if they're using it to do this? Because that's the idea in today's context. Hey, we're going to use AI technology like tools because it's going to allow people to perform more sophisticated tasks. Okay, well, have we thought about what those sophisticated tasks are, and all of that? And so I'm just thinking more patience and more thoughtfulness, which at the same time is nothing new, right? Since we've been managing teams, it's essentially the same. It was some other technology before, some other system, but I think, and it's hard to say patience in a hot environment, probably now is more tense, I guess, has more complexities than probably ever before. But maybe we could have said that 10 years ago too. And understanding that there's people still involved in all of these new fantastic solutions that we want, and we need to consider the impact on those individuals who are using the tool.
Patience, right, is I think it also requires not giving into trends too much, right? Trends come and go in technology, social media, everything, I feel like, right? So it's about balancing trends versus what are the long-term patterns, and taking the time and the patience to even read through those.
Absolutely. In my current business, one of the things that I constantly share, which I feel is going to be, regardless if you're a small woman-led business to a large corporation, you really do need to first understand what it is that you're doing right now, and then decide where are you trying to gain efficiencies or improvements inside your existing process before you go and identify those tools, right? Our initial reaction is whatever brand has like this essentially the best marketing. That's what we're hearing all the time. So everyone believes like we need to buy this tool. We need to investigate it. Yeah, you do need to investigate it. But that's this patience, and with trends, you feel like you're going to fall behind. It's not going to happen. Right? Like, the tools are going to be there. The more thorough you are in, and thorough doesn't mean slow.
Yeah.
Either. The more thorough you are in deciding how this fits into your organization and what you are going to be doing, the better off you're going to be, and not getting caught up in the trends. And that's challenging because of, I mean, this is the nature of organizations, is the pressure from like external pressures, the economy, internal pressures, like the structure inside of the business, whoever is, let's say, the ultimate sponsor and what they're looking for, there's real pressure there. And sometimes it creates an urgency that actually is erratic decision making. And I think we've all experienced that. Yeah. So,
Yeah. So you brought in like an internal component and an external component, organization, inside and outside. So what I'm hearing is part of patience is actually a way of being a cultural thing, organizational,
yes.
right? But you're also acknowledging that it's hard given the speed of everything and just a way of being, I think, that humans have evolved as well, right? Like we are in this high stress environment all the time. So, given all that and these lenses you're bringing in, internal and external, how do today's like leaders, no matter what the size of the organization is, how do they get to that patience? What are some tactics?
I think that the leader, rather than just shooting off demands and requests, I believe this to be true because I believe that I have done this in the past, is do your own a bit of homework. We're not saying do the work of your team,
Yeah.
but do a bit of homework and try to understand, what does this mean for my team? That also allows you as the leader to give good direction, right? Don't just put out some blanket request, right? That it shows that you have no concept of what's really going on and your request is completely unrealistic. I think some of that homework needs to be done from a leadership perspective. And that's, I wouldn't say easy to do, but it's easy enough. You've got colleagues and counterparts that you can reach out to, and there is a ton of information available right at our fingertips now to kind of get to a point where it's like, okay, well, how is my team going to feel about this? If I make a request, what are their concerns going to be? How am I going to support them in those concerns? And the idea is not to just have answers, but to drive them in a direction that was going to produce something that you are looking for, that the business is looking for ultimately. So, and that again adds to more clarity, right? The more that you can understand your own request and what the implications are, you can push people in a better direction because they're also looking to you as the leader for the leadership. And that's what it means, you know?
That's such a good question, right? To keep asking, like, not just for leaders, for everyone. And what does this mean to me and my team?
Yes, exactly.
Right. And that is a reflective question that's going to help the leader take a step back and think.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I say posing these questions, of course, these are not in a superficial manner, right?
Yeah.
There's some depth to it to understand, like, because you want to support your team in a way that makes them feel comfortable, and this is going to help them to also become a high performing team, right? When they see you supporting them in this way by giving good direction, being thoughtful, like, okay, I know this is going to be a bit challenging for these reasons, and have some open dialogue, it will take you a long way, and the results you may get are going to be probably more than what you had anticipated.
Yeah, yeah. Like it helps them give the right support to the team, right? Validate the team's concerns, and just also, I think the leader will then set the tone for the rest of the team on how to approach their work as well, right? In
Absolutely.
a reflective way.
Absolutely. And what I love is, when a leader does that, then you feel the leader is part of the team. It's not that they are sort of separate from the team, they're just issuing commands, but they're sort of fully invested, and not in the sense of I'm a part of this team because if this gets messed up, I am going to be in trouble and you're going to be in trouble. Not that. And I'm bringing the realities, right, of what's out there, but really seeing, okay, the leaders put forth some effort and thought into this. We too can put forth that effort and then some. And that's where more of that almost even collaboration comes, not just within the team, but with the leader who is also a part of the team.
Yeah, a connected, integral part of the team.
Absolutely. But sometimes we just feel that, the leader is there and the leader has a team, but in fact, they are a part of that team, and we shouldn't forget that. Not just in the capacity to give direction, but to be an involved collaborator to some degree.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I like that word, involved collaborate. What do you think is the most immediate thing that needs to change in the current corporate environment? And how can we as individuals, whether you're a leader or not, help with that change?
I think one of the things that I found is never really changed because we're always dealing with humans regardless, is that level of transparency. And of course, leaders are not able to share everything. We're talking about political leaders, they're not going to always share. It's just there's a lot of reasons for that, which we cannot probably understand. But being able to be open and share with your team general direction and not something written off of a script, right? Like the leader themselves might also be a little bit hesitant and nervous, and they're going to have to grapple with that, figure out how to work, like deliver a certain message, to make certain requests. But I think that the way to go is going to be the transparency, because the transparency then, creates trust in your teams. It lets your teams reduce their hesitations and feel free to come and ask you more questions. And what happens is when you have that transparency, then you gain the trust, and you're going to have more team members who are going to come to you freely. And then you do know more of what's happening in the team, what their hesitations are and what the challenges are, and then how to resolve some of those challenges. And I feel like that has never really changed. And as long as we have people in organizations, this is something that we're going to have to figure out how we deal with it and work on that in order to achieve different business goals. I think that in some ways the world is changing, and perhaps people are becoming even less trusting. And so it becomes very tricky. I think the leader needs to understand what is it that your team needs from you that will allow them to trust you, right? Because some people, they feel they can trust you based on different things, right? So you need to kind of understand that, sometimes one of the things that I remember in big corporations, small ones too, where there's always a survey, right? Survey, let's understand how people are feeling about the organization, the direction of the company, the leadership. And one of the most consistent feelings, whether the organization is large, like $1 billion company versus $1 million company, is that people believe the response is, we're not going to be taken seriously, and that there would be no action, real action. And so that's the level of trust. And it may be real, but as a leader, maybe in your little corner of the business, you need to figure out, how do you overcome that challenge and maybe admit or acknowledge and not give textbook answers, right? Real answers. I mean, in the past, that's what I've done. It's like, okay, yep, you may be right about this. Here's the context. This is why this happened. And let's not dwell in the past. What do you think are some solutions? How could we handle this differently? Let's focus on moving forward. Don't just keep giving more textbook answers, because what that does is erodes the trust, right? It's like, we've heard all that before. And in fact, if you are a frequent flyer of like TikTok or Instagram, there's a lot of workplace humor out there. And there are a lot of jokes related to this kind of thing, where it's the leaders are giving textbook answers, that they're not necessarily being transparent or authentic. They know it, their team knows it. It's not a good, like when you start seeing comedy out there, it means there's some truth to it. But I would say, not every organization and not every leader is functioning in this way. And it's challenging. That's why you're the leader, to take on all of these pressures and figure out how to manage your team and get the most out of them. And you yourself also enjoy what you're doing, right? Find a way for you to enjoy what you're doing, so that it's going to trickle down into your team, and then it's reciprocal. Now we're working, we're contributing, because like we say, we spend most of our time with our people, right? physically, maybe not so much as it has been in the past, but most of our time is working. So we really need to find ways to do this in a manner that is going to be, comfortable, I think, for everyone.
Transparency is a must for trust. There's no other way to get to trust. I mean, there are other ways, but this is fundamental way, right? Without transparency, you lose trust.
For me, I believe that to be true. And again, I'm not saying you have to share everything because it's not possible to share everything.
Yeah.
You need to find ways to leave the door open for people that they see, and not like in the traditional sense, like my door is open, always open. We understand what the issues with that. You're asking people who are subordinate to come to you where you need to be going to them in reality, right? So in that, what I mean is, yes, allowing space for people to share openly, right? And knowing that you too will share as openly as you can in the given context.
Yeah, it's about the balancing, right? What can you share? But what you can share, can you share it as transparently as possible? And I think that's the balance every leader is trying to get to in different organizations, different teams. So, Nana, thank you so much for this really deep conversation. This was really, really helpful. If anyone wants to talk more about some of these things, how can they get in touch with you?
Absolutely. You can always find me on LinkedIn, just my first name, my last name. I think there may be a few other Nana Obangs, but you'll be able to identify me. Again, I'm partnering with small business owners to help them with their daily operational issues and resolving those problems using frameworks and best practices and my experience in private sector. So reach out to me, got a question, want to have a conversation. Absolutely happy to jump on a call and do that.
Okay, and I'll link everything in the show notes and all of that as well, including your website. Thank you so much. Thanks again for your time and insights, and I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for the invite.